Space Ghost issue 1. Now, don't get confused because apparently this is Space Ghost issue 1, volume 2. So, I was at my local comic shop, saw this, and of course, Alex Ross had to grab the cover, or at least I believe it's Alex Ross. I may hold on a second. No, friends. You guys know that I'm horrible with names. Francesco Mattina is the cover, but that's very much akin to an Alex Ross. But anyway, that's what kind of drew me to this book. It's very beautifully done. Now, I grew up watching the original Hanna-Barbera Space Ghost, and of course, I used to get laughs back in the day when I was in college watching Space Ghost, Ghost to Ghost. So, kind of seeing this version, I don't know. Let's go through it, and then I'll kind of explain. If you guys want to know more about Space Ghost, feel free to read up, pause it, check it out. This is Dave Pepose writing, Jonathan Lau doing the art, Andrew DeHouse doing the colors, Taylor Esposito doing the lettering. I'm not doing it again. And then Joseph Rybant doing the editing. Now, I like that the book opens. Now, again, remember how when I say with number ones, and I've said this on several different reviews, a number one should really draw you in and be like, wow, this is awesome. There's action, there's drama. And that's what this book does. It says, welcome to Playtopia Prime, the planet where the fun never ends, with brand new attractions for guests of all ages. You don't want to miss the We interrupt this hollow signal for a special message. Greetings, children. They call me the Toymaker. And do I have a surprise for you? That's right. It's the perfect day for a hostage situation. Which is why I've rigged all these fine people to go boom in just 1 hour's time. Of course, there is one way for them to escape planet Slatopia, and all it takes is one teensy tiny little murder. Now, that said, and then boom! Tick-tock, what will it be, my darling Space Ghost? Because when you play with the Toymaker, your fun never ends. Only your life. And don't get me wrong, beautiful artwork. And one thing that I will say in terms of modern comics, when it comes to both Dynamite and Image, like Transformers, I like that, of course they're using the more modern digital artwork. But at least the book, I'm not saying it looks dirty, but I love that the ink is more dominant. So I don't know if they're digitally inking or crap, I can't remember what's the name of the inking tool. It's not called a nub. And then of course they use the India ink. I've been watching a lot of of course That Ink Studio videos on TikTok. So if you guys haven't checked them out, they mix the digital new age stuff with old school traditions, and they give some really great tips. It's awesome. I'll eventually go over the next thing of their books. We've gone over one of them. Anyway, this looks more like traditional comic book, in my opinion, is what I'm trying to get to. I do have one particular gripe with this book. Because we get into this action, we're like, yeah, what's going to happen? And then we cut to an old fart. It's like, come on. I don't care. Because I can only imagine how challenging this must be given the circumstances. I'll admit, I feel the same way. I've spent so long searching for you. But until this moment, I never thought about what I might say. So let's just start from the beginning, shall we? Jan and Jace Kepler, my name is Dr. Henry Contra, and I'm your grandfather. My only regret is that your caretaker wasn't able to join us today. Remind me, where did you say Dax needed to be today? Oh, his work takes him all over, Dr. Contra. But I know that SG or Dax would be here if he could. So this is Jan and Jace. And Space Ghost, of course, came out around the Silver Age. And as we kind of gone over in deep dives, the Silver Age had the explosion of the sidekicks, kicking off with both Dick Grayson and Bucky. And I mean, think about it. There's sidekicks out the butt. We got Speedy, we got Dilby with Alan Scott. And I hate to admit it, and it kind of bled over into the comics, because if memory serves correctly, feel free to make fun of me down in the comments if I get this wrong, but after Jack Kirby essentially kind of didn't really leave comics but kind of took a hiatus, he went over and started working for Hanna-Barbera, and that's how we got things like Thundar and stuff like this, but I think he had a hand in this too. And so I think that's how we got Jan and Jace. And I don't care. I'm sorry. I just don't care. I want to see, and I'm glad at least in between the pages, we'll get what's happening with Dax, Space Ghost, Jan, and Jace. So at least it's complimentary instead of like pages upon freaking pages of talking, like with the Deadpool Batman book that we went over. So at least after that, he goes, sometimes things just get a little hairy in his line of business. And so the conversation that they're having with their estranged grandfather, I like how, and I've said this like with the Alien books, where they're talking about one thing, but there's a juxtaposition of what they're saying, and it segues into what we're seeing on the page. And then Beep Boop, I think is his name. I love that he's a little more violent in this book, and he goes, "Hey, that's cheating, you mangy little flea bag." Not bad, Blip. Maybe you can be useful after all. It's 2 against 1, is it, Space Ghost? That's fine by me. We've still got time to kill, so let's start off with these folks. Space Ghost, the roller coaster, it's headed straight for us. Now, as I was talking about at the beginning of it, I remember Space Ghost having action. It's been a really long time since I've watched the original cartoon. And I like where they're going with it. I love action. Don't get me wrong. I'm entertained. Wasn't bored reading this. But does it not feel like we're essentially just reading Batman at this point? Because even if, I'm not sure in the comics, or if it was strictly for the animated series or the Beyond, I can't remember, but they had a villain named the Toymaker. So you can kind of see the parallels. I don't know. I would kind of hope, like, let's I'm not the world's greatest writer. I couldn't write War and Peace to save my life. But it would be interesting to take Space Ghost, instead of doing Batman-esque, and doing something a little more like Jack Kirby Fourth World, like Orion and Scott Free and Barda. Something like that to show that it's in space, as we're, okay, Playtopia and the people of this planet, I get it, but at the same time, I'm just kind of like, eh. Anyway, then we cut over and they're talking about how Space Ghost saved them and their parents were murdered, yada, yada, yada. There's, again, beautiful artwork. I like how when Blip goes to save the kids that were on the roller coaster, some people say he's just a myth, a cosmic urban legend, while others call him a vigilante fighting the monsters hiding in the dark. And again, that juxtaposition of what Jan and Jace are talking about. And then we see these cyborgs. Ha! I guess it's true what they say. There's nothing like the smell of a polymorphic murder drone. But don't get me wrong, I love the Toymaker. He's very much over the top, like arcade. And I can enjoy that. And it's not like over the top Joker or like the Riddler from the Silver Age. But it has that nice, creepy menacingness to it. And I don't want to give too much of the book away. So while we're getting all the action, and again, they're very generous. So even though, like I said, I hate that it immediately cuts to Jan and Jason, it at least sets the framework for the rest of the story of what's going on. Because Space Ghost is really trying to go after the Toymaker, but he essentially has to give up, make a deal. And I don't want to give that away. I want you guys to read the book. But Jan's having a little bit of PTSD. She says, "Protected, you don't even know the first thing about us. And if you think we're going to leave Dax, you're in for a rude awakening, old man. Because you're not our family. You're barely even a stranger." And so it's going to take some time to see this family kind of pick up the pieces after the murder of his parents. And she goes, "Dax knew better than anyone what it was like to lose. That's why he's never stopped fighting for us." And again, I mean, look at this beautiful color palette of all the action. You get the oranges, the whites, the yellows, the blacks, and of course the nice dirty ink work. You just see that Space Ghost is trying to push through, and Jan's explanation of who Dax is. So again, kind of reevaluating mid-review here. As I say, your first comic should always be the first one that gets you excited about anything. And so even though for fans like us that have seen IPs like this for years and years, looking at it, trying to look at it through a different, fresh spectrum, at least this is the kids kind of explaining who Space Ghost is to a newer generation. So that part I will say is masterly done. And it kind of ends open ended. She goes, "Yeah, you're right, Dr. Contra. I think I know exactly what you mean." He says, "Maybe we could start smaller next time, perhaps over lunch." I really like that. That's good because if there's anything I come to believe is that family is the most precious gift anyone can have. And so it ends on a poignant. And of course, after flipping through, I gotta find Blue Falcon. But anyway, Space Ghost issue 1. Yes, there's a lot of remnants of Batman feelings, a little bit of silly Silver Age, but you know what? I could forget it because this was fun. There wasn't anything to feel like, I'm pointing the finger and look at this obvious social satire, instead of like subtlety, which is always to most things in creativity. It's fun. It wasn't over the top bloody. Space Ghost, unlike the newer age Batman comics where there's always Batman can do anything with prep time. Back in the day, like even pre and post Crisis, until around Batman Year One, which don't get me wrong, I love Frank Miller's work, but up until that time, Batman would make mistakes, and it humanized him a little bit instead of like alienating everyone. He always relied heavily on Gordon or the FBI or whomever he was working with, and it just really gave it a very human essence of Batman being a street level fighter, like Daredevil, for example. And that's what this kind of reminds me of. That Space Ghost is tough, but he's made that way because of the loss that he's felt and why he cares so much for Jan and Jason Blip. And that's kind of where the heart of this book is. So I'm going to check out issue 2. If I come across it, like I'm not going to actively go out and look for it, but if I come across it, hell yeah, I'm going to pick it up and go over issue 2 because issue 1 was awesome. So if you all have enjoyed what you've seen, please first and foremost support your local comic shop or wherever it is you get your action figures and comics and grab this series. If you've enjoyed this review, really would appreciate it. Take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you want to hit that fancy little Space Ghost bell next to subscribe, that way as I can upload content, you guys get notified. Come to the channel, and I love talking with you on hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments or the socials, which I'll make sure the links down in the description. So with all that said, hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.